The silence was the first thing they should have feared. For 3,000 cycles, the Vexian ascendancy had known only the righteous hum of its celestial engines, the choral proclamations of its sanctifiers, and the ordered static of a million subjugated worlds whispering their compliance across the void. It was a galaxy defined by Vexian sound, a symphony of absolute control where every note was preordained, every rest measured, and every crescendo a testament to their immutable dominion. They had mapped the fundamental laws of the universe, enshrined them as scripture, and built an empire on the unshakable conviction that reality was a closed system, a grand but ultimately finite equation they alone had solved. Anything that defied the sacred physics was not a discovery, but a heresy, a dissonant chord to be silenced before it could corrupt the celestial harmony. Thus, they had grown rigid, arrogant, their fleets of obsidian warships, the Judicators patrolling the star lanes less as explorers and more as celestial auditors, ensuring the cosmos adhered to their divine calculus. They had encountered other races, of course dozens of them, whimpering sparks of nascent life still clinging to grubby planets, fumbling with chemical rockets and clumsy radio waves. The Vexians cataloged them, quarantined them, and on occasion benevolently culled them, all to preserve the sanctity of the known. Humanity was one such spark, a particularly noisy and chaotic species on a wet, unremarkable world. The Vexian archivists had labeled Sol 3 notable only for their rapid, almost frantic rate of technological turnover and their baffling obsession with broadcasting mindless entertainment into deep space. The Ascendancy had observed them for 2 centuries, dismissing their progress as the frantic scrabbling of primitives who mistook uncontrolled combustion for genuine power. Their ships were crude, loud things, tearing holes in space-time with brutal, inefficient drives that screamed their presence across the light years. The Vexians watched them with the detached pity of a gardener observing a patch of particularly aggressive weeds, confident in the knowledge that they could never truly breach the walls of their cosmic garden. They were wrong. The silence that would unravel their empire began on Triton, Neptune's frozen moon, where a human survey team, searching for rare earth metals, drilled through 3 kilometers of nitrogen ice and into something impossible. Wasn't a structure or an artifact in any conventional sense. It was a forest of crystalline spires, perfectly black and impossibly thin, humming with a sound that wasn't sound at all. It was a resonance that vibrated in the empty spaces between atoms, a silent chorus that seemed to sing in a language older than matter. Dr. Eris Thorne was the xenolinguist sent to make sense of it, a man more comfortable with the dead syntax of forgotten alien civilizations than the company of his own species. He was thin and perpetually distracted, his eyes always focused on a point just beyond whatever he was looking at, if trying to read the subtitles of reality. When he first laid his gloved hand on one of the spires, the universe fell away. It wasn't a vision or a data stream. It was a feeling, a pure, intuitive understanding of geometry as music and physics as a performance. The spires, which he named the Silent Choir, did not communicate facts. They taught harmony. They revealed that the rigid laws of physics the Vexians held so sacred were merely a single, monotonous chord in an infinite symphony. The choir taught a way to sing a different song, to harmonize with space-time itself, to bend it, fold it, and convince it to be somewhere else entirely. This discovery was humanity's most guarded secret, a project so classified it existed only in whispers in the deepest, most shielded facilities on Earth and Luna. They built a ship around the choir, a vessel designed not for war but for listening. They called it the Echo, a sleek, unassuming explorer with a hull of layered metamaterials that seemed to drink the light. Its heart was not a reactor, but a resonance chamber where a fragment of the choir was suspended in a magnetic field, its silent song channeled through a series of fractal amplifiers. Its captain, Lena Petrova, was a pragmatist, a former ice hauler from the Kuiper Belt with a face like a star chart and hands that knew how to fix a failing life support system with nothing but a wrench and a curse. She trusted her crew and her ship, but she had a deep, abiding distrust of the ethereal music Eris Thorne claimed to hear. For a year, they made short, tentative hops in system, testing the choir's abilities. They didn't burn through space, they resonated with it. The echo would hum, its hull vibrating with an unheard frequency, and reality would simply agree to its relocation. One moment it was orbiting Mars, the next it was hanging in the void beyond Pluto, with no trail, no energy signature, no indication it had ever moved. It was the ultimate stealth, a perfect magic trick. The fateful test was meant to be their first interstellar jump, a modest 5 light-year hop to Alpha Centauri. Eris was on the bridge, his fingers tracing patterns on a console that translated the choir's resonance into visual data, a swirling mandala of impossible colors. Petrova gave the command, her voice steady. "Engage the drive. Take us out." Eris. Eris closed his eyes, placing his hands on the cool, crystalline interface, and became the conductor. He didn't input coordinates. He suggested a destination, weaving a harmonic sequence that described the space-time topology of their target. He felt the choir respond, its silent song swelling, the ship shivering around him as it began to decohere from local reality. But something was wrong. Another note, sour and aggressive, intruded on the harmony. It was a deep, powerful gravity well, unpredicted and unmapped, a cosmic monolith that bent their resonant path like a lens warping light. The mandala on Eris's screen flared violently, colors bleeding into a furious crimson. Alarms blared, a shocking, primitive intrusion into the silent symphony of the drive. "What is that?" Petrova snapped, gripping the command chair, her knuckles white. "I don't know," Eris stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's pulling us. The harmony is collapsing." The jump was supposed to last less than a second. Instead, they were trapped in a nauseating state of transit, a non-space where the stars outside the viewport smeared into streaks of cold fire. Then, with a lurch that threw the crew against their restraints, they were back in reality. But it wasn't the familiar, comforting glare of Alpha Centauri. They were adrift in a nebula of stunning, terrifying beauty, a swirl of incandescent violet and emerald gas clouds that pulsed with an inner light. "Location," Petrova demanded, and the ship's navigator, a young man named Jax, stared at his console, his face pale. I can't get a fix, Captain. The star charts are meaningless. We're not anywhere I know. We're not anywhere humanity knows." They had overshot their destination by 50,000 light-years, hurled into the uncharted heart of the Vexian ascendancy. And they were not alone. Emerging from the glowing mist were 12 ships, vast and monolithic, shaped like obsidian tuning forks. Their hulls were so black they seemed to consume the light of the nebula, and they moved with a silent, ponderous grace that spoke of immense power and unshakable purpose. Vexian judicators. "Shields," Petrova whispered, her voice a low growl. "Go to full, silent running. Mask everything." But it was too late. The Vexian ships turned in unison, their movements perfectly synchronized and focused on the small human vessel. They didn't hail them. They didn't launch fighters. They projected a field, a shimmering wave of energy that washed over the Echo. On the bridge, every system that relied on conventional physics went haywire. Consoles sparked, gravity plating fluctuated, and a deep, oppressive hum vibrated through the deck. It was a suppression field, designed to neutralize any known form of propulsion or weaponry. It was the Vexian way of saying, "You do not belong here. You will submit." Inside the lead judicator, High Sanctifier Kalen watched the intruder on his command dais. The small ship was an anomaly, a blasphemy. It had simply appeared, without a warp signature, without a tear in the fabric of space. It was a violation of established cosmic law, an affront to the divine order. His duty was clear. The heresy must be contained, its secrets dissected, and its creators purged. "Ensnare the vessel," Kalen commanded, his voice devoid of emotion, the clicks and whistles of the Vexian language echoing in the cavernous bridge. "Prepare a purification detail. I want to know how the primitives achieved this vulgar trick." Aboard the Echo, the crew was trapped. The suppression field was tightening, a boa constrictor of pure energy squeezing the life out of their ship. "Main power is failing," Jax yelled. "We can't move. We can't even send a distress signal." Petrova looked at Eris, who was staring at his console, his expression one of intense concentration. The choir's mandala was dim, flickering, but still active. "Eris," she said, her voice cutting through the panic. "That music of yours, you said it rewrites the rules. Can it get us out of this?" Eris didn't look up. Their field is based on the assumption that physics is a constant, as a brute force application of harmonic law. They're singing a single, deafeningly loud note, trying to drown everything else out. "Can you sing louder?" she pressed. "No," Eris said, a strange, feverish light in his eyes. "But I can sing a different song. I can introduce a counter-resonance, a discord." He had never tried it before. The choir was meant to create harmony with space-time, not dissonance. But he could feel the Vexian field now, could sense its rigid, arrogant structure. He knew the note they were playing, and he knew how to break it. "Do it," Petrova ordered, her decision absolute. Eris placed his hands back on the interface. He didn't try to power through the Vexian field. He listened to it, felt its rhythm, and then, with the choir as his instrument, he played a single silent note that was its perfect inverse. It was the sonic equivalent of a mathematical paradox, a statement of acoustic impossibility. On the bridge of the Echo, nothing happened. But outside, in the heart of the Vexian suppression field, chaos erupted. The focused energy wave that had held them began to fray. Its perfect symmetry shattered. It wasn't an explosion. It was a detuning. The Vexian ships, so perfectly harmonized with each other and their own technology, were suddenly caught in a wave of pure dissonance. High Sanctifier Kalen watched in disbelief as his command console began to flicker. A low hum filled his bridge, a sound no Vexian had heard in a millennium, the sound of imperfect technology. "Report!" he shrieked, his composure cracking for the first time in his long life. What is the source of this resonance cascade? But no one could answer. The very atoms of the Judicator flagship were vibrating out of phase with one another. The obsidian hull, designed to be immutable, began to shimmer, its molecular bonds loosening. Crew members stared at their own hands as they turned translucent, the harmonious structure of their own bodies dissolving. The discord Eris had unleashed was not a weapon that destroyed. It was an argument that convinced. It convinced the Vexian ships that their own molecular cohesion was a lie. One by one, the 12 judicators fell silent. They didn't explode in fire and fury. They simply unraveled. Their solid hulls dissolved into shimmering clouds of constituent atoms. Their power cores fizzled into harmless radiation, and their crews faded into motes of dust that mingled with the vibrant gases of the nebula. It took less than 10 seconds. Where a fleet of the Ascendancy's finest had been, there was now only a glittering, expanding cloud of elementary particles and a stunned, terrified silence that was deeper and more absolute than anything the galaxy had ever known. Aboard the Echo, the suppression field was gone. The lights flickered back to full intensity. The ship was free. The crew stared at the main view screen, at the ghostly, beautiful remains of the Vexian fleet, their faces a mixture of awe and horror. They had just witnessed the complete annihilation of a dozen warships without firing a single shot. "Eris," Petrova breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "What did you do?" Eris Thorn pulled his hands away from the interface, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked at the screen, at the silent, glittering tomb he had created, and for the first time he understood the true power of the choir. It wasn't just a drive system. It wasn't just a communication device. It was the voice of creation itself. "I think," he said, his voice shaking, "I just taught them a new song." And across 50,000 light years, on the throne world of Vex, 1,000 listening posts that had been monitoring the sacred hum of the Judicator fleet all went silent at the exact same moment, leaving behind a void that screamed louder than any explosion. The age of harmony was over. The age of silence had begun. The silence that followed was heavier than any planet. A vacuum not just of sound, but of comprehension. On the bridge of the Echo, the crew remained frozen, strapped into their chairs, staring at the dissipating cloud of radiant dust that had, moments before, been a fleet of invincible warships. The nebula's ethereal glow seemed to mock them, its serene beauty a stark contrast to the casual, absolute act of destruction they had just committed. It was Jax, the young navigator, who broke the spell, his voice cracking as he whispered, "God, they're gone. They're just gone." Lena Petrova unbuckled herself, her movement stiff, automatic. Her mind, usually a clean flowchart of command decisions, was a maelstrom of conflicting instincts. There was no protocol for this, no chapter in the Sol Command Manual for vaporizing an alien fleet with a song. She walked over to Eris Thorn, who was slumped against his console, his face ashen, his hands trembling as if he'd touched a live conductor. "Talk to me, Eris," she said, her voice low and steady, a captain's anchor in a sea of impossibility. "What was that? Was that you? Was that the choir?" Iris looked up, his eyes unfocused, still seeing the ghost of the harmony he had broken. "It wasn't a weapon," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "It was a sentence, an argument. Their entire technology, their biology, it's all predicated on a single unwavering harmonic principle, a universal constant they believe to be the only one. I just showed them it wasn't." He took a shuddering breath. "I told them a truth their existence couldn't withstand." Petrova placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor run through him. "Can you do it again?" The question was cold, pragmatic, and necessary. Eris flinched as if struck. He looked at the glittering dust cloud on the view screen and then back at her, a profound horror dawning in his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered, "and I never want to find out." The moral weight of their survival settled on the bridge like a shroud. They were explorers, scientists, not soldiers. They hadn't fired a weapon. They had weaponized reality itself. Petrova straightened up, her expression hardening as she swept her gaze across the shaken crew. Status report. Full ship diagnostics. I want to know what that Vexian field did to us. And I want to know where the hell we are. Jax, start with the local star cluster. Cross-reference pulsar timings, nebular composition. Anything. We're blind out here. And I don't intend to stay that way. The crew, grateful for the return of familiar procedure, snapped into action. Their movements a balm against the lingering shock. But as the reports trickled in, the picture grew bleaker. They were 50,000 light-years from home. Their conventional long-range sensors were useless in the exotic radiation of the nebula, and the jump that brought them here had been a chaotic, uncontrolled tumble through space-time. There was no clear path back. Their only compass was the silent choir, the very thing that had become an unimaginable liability. But meanwhile, on the Vexian throne world of Sanctum, a planet of perfect crystal spires and resonating archways that hummed the eternal anthem of order, a single note went silent. In the Grand Orrery, where the real-time position and status of every Judicator fleet were represented by a constellation of floating, harmonized crystals, 12 lights representing the 7th Holy Armada simply ceased to be. They did not blink red for distress or amber for system failure. They went dark. The silence was not an absence of data. It was a null state, a logical paradox that the Ascendancy's vast computational engines could not process. The event triggered an immediate convocation of the Quorum of Sanctifiers, the ruling council of the Vexian Empire. They gathered in the resonance chamber, a vast hall where the very air vibrated with the anthem. But now, a subtle, sickening dissonance seemed to hang in the air, a stain on the perfection. Grand Inquisitor Malachi, head of the Office of Cosmic Heresy, observed the proceedings with cold detachment. Unlike the other sanctifiers, who were rigid ideologues, Malachi was a pragmatist, a being who understood that even in a perfect system, anomalies could arise. It was his sacred duty to find them and burn them out before they could fester. "The fleet is gone," declared the High Sanctifier, his voice a series of perfectly modulated chimes. There was no warp signature, no energy bloom, no distress call. They simply stopped. "Impossible." Another Sanctifier countered. "Our ships cannot stop. Their existence is a constant. This is a failure of the orrery, a flaw in our listening posts." Malachi stepped forward, his obsidian robes rustling. "Or it is a success," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly hum that seemed to absorb the light. The other Sanctifiers turned to him, their multifaceted eyes narrowing. "A success of a force we have not yet accounted for in our divine calculus. For 3,000 years, we have assumed the universe sings only our song. This silence suggests another choir has begun to practice." He gestured to a floating hololith, which displayed the last known coordinates of the 7th Armada, a nebula the Vexians had designated the Veil of Whispers, long considered inert and unimportant. The data streams from the fleet did not cease. They were rewritten. In the final microsecond of transmission, every channel broadcast a single, repeating wave of pure entropic resonance, a signal that does not transmit information, but actively negates it. It is not an attack. It is an argument. And it is one our fleet appears to have lost. A chill settled over the quorum. The concept was blasphemous. "What do you propose?" "Inquisitor," the High Sanctifier asked. "We dispatch the First Armada, our most holy fleet. We will purify the veil with stellar fire. We will boil the nebula until no atom can resonate with another." Malachi's head tilted slightly. "An emotional, and therefore flawed, response. Burning the field will not tell us who planted the seeds. No, we must listen. I will take my ship, the Quiet Inquiry, and go to the Veil. I will not hunt for a ship. I will hunt for the echo of its silence. I will find this stain upon the anthem, and I will learn its nature before we erase it from existence." Back on the Echo, a plan was forming. Petrova, Eris, and Jax huddled over the navigation console, which now displayed a swirling, abstract map generated by Eris's connection to the choir. It wasn't a star chart. It was a resonance map, showing the harmonic currents of the local galactic region. "The Vexian Empire," Eris explained, tracing a finger across a vast, interconnected web of brilliant light. "It's a network, a symphony. Every one of their worlds, their ships, their structures, hums in unison. It's how they maintain control. It's what we felt when they trapped us." "So we're in the middle of their orchestra pit," Petrova surmised grimly. "Can you find a way through it? A quiet spot?" "Not through," Eris said, shaking his head. "The choir doesn't travel through space. It harmonizes with it. To get home, I can't just aim for Saul. I have to find a harmonic pathway, a series of cosmic notes that will lead us back. The problem is, every direction I listen, I hear their song. It's everywhere." It was a terrifying thought. They were trapped inside an instrument the size of a galaxy, and its players now knew they were there. Their only hope was to move without being heard. "We'll make a series of short, controlled jumps," Petrova decided. "Micro jumps. We'll hop from one quiet pocket to another, like a rabbit darting between bushes. Eris, you find the quiet spots. Jax, you try to build a conventional star map from wherever we land. We move slow, we move quiet, and we pray they don't hear us." The next few days were a blur of tension and exhaustion. Eris would spend hours in a deep meditative trance. His mind merged with the silent choir, searching for the faintest gaps in the Vexian symphony. He'd find a path, a fleeting moment of cosmic quiet, and give the command. The echo would shiver. The world outside would dissolve into a brief, silent blur, and they'd reappear in a new, unknown corner of space. Each time, their hearts hammered in their chests as they scanned for the telltale obsidian shapes of judicators. Each time, they found only empty void. They were a ghost, flitting through the veins of a sleeping giant. But Ares was changing. The prolonged immersion in the choir was affecting him. He spoke less, ate little, and spent most of his waking hours with his eyes closed, listening. He told Petrova that he could feel the Vexian network more clearly now, not as a threat, but as a presence. He could feel its thoughts, its rigid, unyielding certainty, its growing, cold panic. He could feel the search patterns, the fleets of judicators moving in perfect geometric sweeps, hunting for the source of the dissonance. He could feel the focused will of a single mind, cold and sharp as a shard of obsidian, sifting through the silence they had left behind. That mind belonged to Inquisitor Malachi, aboard the Quiet Inquiry, a vessel designed not for combat, but for cosmic eavesdropping. Malachi drifted through the veil of whispers. His ship was a sensor array wrapped around a cloaking field, and he was listening with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. He found the glittering cloud of dust, the sacred remains of the Seventh Armada, and his sensors confirmed the impossible. Every atom was in its ground state, perfectly stable, perfectly silent. There was no trace of weaponry, no exotic radiation, just peace. It was the most profound act of desecration he had ever witnessed. But as he analyzed the residual space-time distortions, he found it a faint, impossibly subtle scar in the local harmony. It was the echo of the echo's departure. They did not burn, he whispered to his acolyte. They did not break. They were retuned. The heretics did not use force. They used a question. He recalibrated his ship's sensors, ordering them to ignore all known forms of energy and matter and to search only for these harmonic scars. The hunt was on. Aboard the Echo, after their 7th micro jump, Jax finally had a breakthrough. He'd managed to triangulate their position from a trio of ancient, stable pulsars. The news was both good and bad. They had a rough heading back toward human space, but they were still 40,000 light-years away, and they were currently hiding in a dark nebula on the edge of a major Vexian star system. The system, designated Sanctum Secundus, was a hub, a nexus of Vexian power. From his console, Aris could feel its song, a powerful, resonant chord that pulsed with unwavering authority. "We have to go around it," Petrova said immediately. "A wide berth. The last thing we need is to stumble into their version of Grand Central Station." "We can't," Aris said, his eyes still closed. "The harmonic currents are too strong. It's like trying to paddle a canoe across a whirlpool. Any jump we make from here will be pulled towards the system's gravity well." But he paused, a new, dangerous idea forming in his mind. There's a flaw in their song, a quiet spot, right in the middle of it. Jax pulled up the system on his screen. It was dominated by a central star and a dozen planets, all tidally locked and covered in the Vexian signature crystalline architecture. But one of the moons, orbiting a gas giant in the outer system, was different. It was dark. Scans showed it had no structures, no energy signature, nothing. The Vexians seemed to be ignoring it completely. "It's a dead moon," Jax said. "A barren rock." "No," Aris whispered, a strange intensity in his voice. "It's not empty. It's silent. The Vexians are singing so loudly all around it that they can't hear it. They've created their own blind spot. That's our next jump." Petrova hesitated. It was a huge risk, jumping directly into a major enemy system. But it was also the only path Aris could find that felt safe. It was a choice between the devil they knew and the void they didn't. "Do it," she said, her voice tight. "Take us to the silent moon." Aris nodded, his hands moving to the choir's interface. He focused on the pocket of silence, weaving a path through the roaring Vexian symphony. The echo hummed, reality blurred, and they were gone. They reappeared in the shadow of the gas giant, the dark moon looming before them. The silence was profound, a welcome relief after days spent hiding in the noise. But as their sensors began to passively scan the moon's surface, they realized their mistake. The moon wasn't silent because it was empty. It was silent because it was a prison. Deep beneath its surface, something was being held, something the Vexians feared so much they had built a fortress of harmonic noise around it to keep it contained. And from the quiet inquiry, thousands of light years away, Inquisitor Malachi saw it, a new scar on the anthem, far clearer than the last, pointing directly towards Sanctum Secundus. And it didn't just point to the system. It pointed to the one place no Vexian was ever meant to go, the prison moon. "Heresy," Malachi hummed, his voice a blade of ice. "It does not run from us. It seeks out our deepest secrets." He set a course. The hunt was no longer a search, it was a race. The silence of the moon was a living thing. It was not the simple absence of noise, but a deep, resonant void that seemed to push back against the omnipresent hum of the Vexian ascendancy. As the echo hung in the lee of the gas giant, its passive sensors drinking in the strangeness, the crew felt the silence as a physical presence, a pressure against the hull and a quiet in their own minds. It was a pocket of defiance in a galaxy built on enforced harmony. "The Vexians aren't just ignoring this moon," Jax reported from his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "They're actively containing it. The system's primary resonance frequency, their anthem, is being focused and amplified around this entire sector. It's like they've built a cage out of their song." Lena Petrova stood behind him, staring at the swirling energy schematics on the screen. The moon was a black hole in a sea of Vexian noise. "A prison," she breathed, the word tasting like ash. "What are they keeping in there?" The question was directed at the room, but everyone looked at Eris Thorne. He was already at his station, his eyes closed, his consciousness extended, listening not with his ears but with the full sensory apparatus of the silent choir. The choir, which had been agitated and cautious amidst the Vexian symphony, seemed to lean into this pocket of silence, like a traveler finding a soundproof room in a deafeningly loud city. "It's not empty," Eris whispered, his voice distant, ethereal. "There's a consciousness in there, faint, ancient. It's sleeping or dormant. The Vexian anthem is a lullaby, holding it in stasis." He winced, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "The anthem is designed to suppress dissonance. Whatever is down there, it must be the ultimate discord." The strategic implications were immediate and terrifying. They had sought refuge in the one place the Vexians feared most. It was the equivalent of a fugitive hiding from the police inside their most secure supermax prison. Their first instinct was to run, to make another blind, desperate jump into the unknown. But where could they go? The Vexian network was everywhere, and their hunters were now actively searching for the signature of their silence. "We can't stay. And we can't run," Petrova stated, her voice grinding with the frustration of their predicament. "Which means our only option is to understand. Aris, can you talk to it?" Eris hesitated. "I can try. But to do that, I have to filter out the Vexian song and focus the choir's resonance on the prison. It's like trying to whisper to someone across a hurricane. If I'm not careful, they'll hear me. They'll know exactly where we are." "They already know," Petrova said, her gaze fixed on the dark moon. "The jump we made here was a lighthouse beam in the dark. They're coming. The only question is whether we'll have a new card to play when they arrive." "Do it. Gently." Eris nodded, settling into his trance. He became the lens Sharkets, gathering the subtle power of the choir and focusing it into a single, probing tendril of silent music. He aimed it at the heart of the moon, past the cage of Vexian harmony. He didn't send a message, he sent a question, a simple melodic phrase of curiosity. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a reply. It wasn't in language. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated emotion that flooded the bridge of the echo through Eris. It was the feeling of immense, soul-crushing loneliness, of eons spent in silent darkness, of a mind stretched to the breaking point of sanity. Eris gasped, his body jolting as if from an electric shock, and the connection broke. "It's aware," he panted, clutching his head. "It's been awake this whole time, Listening. Before he could say more, an alarm chimed softly from Jax's console. "Captain," Jax said, his voice tight with dread, "we have a visitor." A single Vexian ship dropped out of folded space at the edge of the system. It wasn't Adjudicator, bristling with the architecture of war. The ship was smaller, sleeker, a blade of polished obsidian that seemed to absorb the very concept of light. It radiated no energy, no engine signature, no anthem. It was utterly terrifyingly quiet. "It's him," Eris whispered, a cold sweat on his brow. "The mind I felt hunting us. He's here." It was the quiet inquiry. Aboard its bridge, Inquisitor Malachi observed the dark moon. His long-range harmonic sensors had detected the faint, pathetic whisper Eris had sent. It was like seeing a single candle lit in a vast, dark cathedral. "They are communing with the anathema," he hummed, a flicker of something akin to scientific curiosity in his voice. "The primitives are more audacious than I calculated." He did not power up weapons. He did not advance. He simply waited, his ship a predator watching from the reeds, letting its prey reveal its intentions. He had them trapped. The system was a Vexian fortress, and they were huddling next to its most dangerous secret. All he had to do was watch them tear themselves apart. The arrival of Malachi's ship forced Petrova's hand. Their time for caution was over. "Eris, connect with it again," she commanded. "Find out what it is. Find out if it can help us." "He'll hear us," Jax protested. "He's already listening," Petrova shot back. "Our only chance is to be louder than he expects." Eris plunged back in. But this time he didn't whisper. He sent a powerful chord of introduction, a declaration of the echo's presence, powered by the full, focused resonance of the choir. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. A torrent of information, of memories not his own, flooded his mind. He saw a Vexian society that was not monolithic, but vibrant and full of debate. He saw philosophers and artists who explored the universe not as a fixed equation to be enforced, but as a boundless symphony to be explored. He saw the one they called the Dissident. The Dissident had been a Vexian scholar who first proposed that the anthem of order was not the only song in the cosmos. He argued that dissonance, chaos, and unpredictability were not flaws in reality, but essential components of its true nature. He learned to sing the other songs, to weave melodies of change and probability, to the ascendancy. This was the ultimate heresy. They couldn't kill him. His understanding of resonance made him impervious to their weapons, so they built a prison of perfect, unchanging order around him, a cage of monotony designed to deafen him for eternity. The Dissident offered Eris, and through him, the crew of the Echo, a deal. The choir was a key, an instrument capable of playing a note that could shatter the prison's harmonic lock. If they freed him, he would teach them a new song, the Song of Passage, a way to fold space-time so perfectly that they could cross the entire galaxy in a single, untraceable moment. It was their ticket home, but he also showed Eris the consequences. His release would be a cataclysmic chord of chaos injected into the heart of the Vexian symphony. It would not destroy their empire, but it would shatter their control, sow discord on a galactic scale, and plunge the ascendancy into a civil war of ideas. They would be unleashing a force of pure, untamed change upon a galaxy that had known only rigid stability for millennia. Eris relayed the offer to Petrova, his voice hoarse, his eyes wide with the sheer scale of the choice before them. "He says the Vexians built their empire on a lie, a half-truth. They chose one note and declared it the only one worth hearing. He wants to play the rest of the symphony." And what happens to us? Petrova asked, the pragmatic core of the question cutting through the cosmic philosophy. We'd be at the epicenter of the resulting, whatever you'd call it, a revolution, a cataclysm. He'll get us home, Eris insisted. I felt the truth of it. He can do it. Outside, the quiet inquiry made its first move. A thin, precise beam of focused resonance lanced out from the ship, not at the Echo, but at the prison moon. It was a probe, a key seeking a lock, as Malachi attempted to analyze the prison's integrity and the nature of the Echo's communication. On the Echo's bridge, the deep silence was momentarily broken by a high-pitched whine. The probe was designed to agitate whatever was inside, to force a reaction. The wave of loneliness Eris had felt before returned, but now it was tinged with a spike of ancient, terrible anger. The moon's core seemed to darken, absorbing the Inquisitor's probe like a sponge. He's trying to provoke it, Eris gasped. He wants to see what we've woken up. The decision had been made for them. To stay was to be dissected by Malachi. To run was impossible. Their only path forward was through the chaos. How do we do it? Petrova asked, her voice set, her eyes like chips of ice. How do we open the cage? Eris turned back to his console, his fingers flying across the interface. The dissident was feeding him the sequence, a complex, multi-layered melody of harmonic deconstruction. The choir has to sing a specific counter-frequency, he explained, his voice gaining strength, filled with a sense of purpose. It's not a battering ram, it's a resonance key. We have to perfectly match the anthem's frequency and then invert its phase. It will cancel out the cage. Like noise-canceling headphones for a prison, Jax muttered, his expression a mix of terror and awe. All right, Petrova said, turning to her crew. Her voice rang with a commander's clarity. Strap in. Route all non-essential power to the choir's resonance chamber. Eris, you are the gun, the bullet, and the trigger. On my mark. She looked at the obsidian blade of the quiet inquiry, hanging in the void, watching, waiting. She knew Malachi would not let this happen without a fight. This was no longer just about their survival. They were choosing a side in a war that was older than their species. They were about to ring a bell that could never be unrung. Mark. Eris Thorne closed his eyes one last time, took a deep breath, and began to play. The echo vibrated, not with the shudder of a machine, but with the clear, pure tone of a tuning fork struck against a star. A beam of silent, coherent sound, a perfect anti-melody, shot from the ship and struck the heart of the Vexian prison. And, across the void, Inquisitor Malachi watched, his calm exterior finally breaking as he whispered a single word of Vexian scripture, a word that had not been uttered in 3,000 years, reckoning. And the note Eris played was the sound of a key turning in a lock that had rusted for millennia. It was a perfect, silent inversion of the Vexian anthem, a chord of pure anti-order that struck the harmonic cage around the prison moon, not with force, but with flawless logic. For a breathtaking moment, the two opposing frequencies met and annihilated each other, creating an instant of absolute, profound null state. In that instant, the cage of sound that had held the dissident for eons ceased to exist. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. From the core of the moon, a wave of unrestrained, chaotic resonance erupted outwards. It was not a blast of energy or an explosion of matter. It was a psychic shockwave of pure, untamed possibility. On the bridge of the Echo, the crew felt it as a wave of vertigo. as if the fundamental laws of physics had suddenly become suggestions rather than rules. The ship's internal gravity fluctuated wildly. Tools floated from their moorings, and the very air seemed to shimmer with 1,000 fleeting, impossible colors. The dissident was free. Aboard the Quiet Inquiry, Inquisitor Malachi experienced the release as a physical blow. The rigid, perfect harmony of his own ship faltered for the first time. Consoles flickered, and the carefully maintained internal hum of his vessel stuttered into a discordant whine. His acolyte cried out, clutching its head as the wave of pure chaos washed over its ordered Vexian mind. Malachi, however, remained standing, his feet planted, his will a fortress against the tide. He had spent his life studying heresy, and now he was witnessing its apotheosis. He watched his sensors as the prison moon began to fracture, not from explosive force, but as if its very concept was coming undone. Great chasms of non-reality split its surface, and from them poured a light that was not light, a swirling aurora of raw, untamed creation. So, Malachi hummed, a strange, yet almost reverent tone in his voice. This is the sound of a new symphony beginning. He did not flee. He did not attack. He opened every sensor, every listening device on his ship, and began to record. This was no longer an inquisition. It was the discovery of a new cosmic truth, and he would be its first and only chronicler. The dissident's consciousness, no longer a faint whisper, now filled the space around the echo, a vast, booming presence that resonated directly in the minds of the crew. It had no voice, but its thoughts were as clear as spoken words. Gratitude, little sparks. You have returned the gift of change to a galaxy that has forgotten how to grow. A new stream of information flowed into Eris's mind, the promised Song of Passage. It was a harmonic sequence of breathtaking complexity and elegance, a way of perceiving space-time not as a fabric to be torn, but as a current to be joined. It was a map and a vessel all in one. Eris, his face flush with the sheer beauty of the concept, began translating the song into the choir's interface. "I have it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Captain, I have the way home." But before they could act, the dissident's presence sharpened, its tone shifting from gratitude to an urgent warning. "They have awakened their answer to me, the echo of order. It is coming. You must leave now." "What is he talking about?" Petrova demanded, her eyes scanning the chaos outside. As if in answer, a new resonant signature tore through the system, a sound so powerful and pure it momentarily drowned out even the dissident's chaotic song. From the heart of the Sanctum Secundus system, a Vexian world covered in military installations began to glow with an intense silver light. A beam of energy, thicker than any judicator, shot across the system and struck the gas giant they were hiding behind. The planet, a behemoth 1,000 times the size of Jupiter, did not explode. It was silenced. Its great storm ceased. Its swirling clouds froze in place, and its immense gravitational field simply vanished. The planet became a perfect, inert sphere, a monument to absolute stasis. "Dear God, Jashi," Jax breathed, staring at his dead sensors. What could do that? From behind the now frozen planet, a new Vexian vessel emerged. It dwarfed even the Judicators, a vast, cathedral-like ship, shaped like a perfect, multifaceted crystal. It pulsed with a pure, silver light, and it sang a single, unwavering note of the anthem, amplified to a power that could nullify a star. This was a Vexian archangel, a weapon ship of last resort, a guardian of the fundamental Vexian truth. This was the final word, the instrument designed to silence me forever. The dissident communicated, its presence recoiling from the Archangel's overwhelming song. It does not destroy. It enforces conformity on a quantum level. It will unmake you not by breaking you apart, but by making you part of its song. Flee. Use the passage. Aris, now! Petrova yelled. Eris's hands were a blur on the console, his mind racing to input the complex melody of the passage. The silent choir began to hum, its resonance shifting, preparing to harmonize with the very curvature of the galaxy. But the final word was too fast. It projected a wave of its silver, silencing energy. It wasn't an attack that flew through space. It was an instantaneous retuning of reality itself. The chaotic light pouring from the prison moon dimmed. The dissident's powerful, multifaceted consciousness seemed to shrink, to quiet, under the oppressive weight of that single perfect note. The echo was caught in the edge of the wave. The ship groaned, its systems struggling against a force that was trying to rewrite their physical properties. On the bridge, the frantic energy of the dissident's release was replaced by a creeping, soporific calm. The crew felt their thoughts slowing, their sense of individuality fading. A peaceful, blissful desire to simply cease their struggle and accept the perfection of the Vexian anthem washing over them. No, Petrova growled, fighting the encroaching mental fog. She slammed her fist on the command chair's armrest, the jolt of pain a welcome anchor to her own identity. Jax, override the safeties. Divert the life support energy reserves to the choir's containment field. All of it. Captain, that's insane. We'll be on emergency oxygen for minutes, Jax protested, his own movements becoming sluggish. Do it, she roared, her voice a splash of chaotic humanity in the sea of calm. The sudden surge of power hit the resonance chamber. The silent choir, which had been struggling against the Archangel's song, flared with renewed strength. It was enough. Eris, his own will fading, found the last chord of the passage and struck it. The universe dissolved. There was no lurch, no smear of stars, no sensation of movement at all. One moment, they were on the precipice of annihilation in the Sanctum Secunda system. The next, they were adrift in a silent, familiar void. The main view screen was dominated by the brilliant, comforting glare of a G-type main sequence star. Jax, shaking his head as if waking from a long dream, stared at his console, his eyes widening in disbelief. Stellar classification matches. Navigational markers confirm. Captain, that's Sol. That's home. A ragged cheer went up on the bridge, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. They had done it. They were home. But their relief was short-lived. As the ship's long-range comms came back online, they were flooded with a torrent of encrypted, panicked signals from every corner of human space. Sol Command, the Kuiper Belt mining guilds, the Martian colonies, all of them were in a state of high alert. While they had been gone, lost in the heart of the Vexian Empire, only a few days had passed for them. But back home, nearly 2 years had gone by. The Vexian ascendancy had arrived. Dozens of Judicator fleets had methodically advanced into human territory. They hadn't attacked, not in the traditional sense. They had simply arrived. They surrounded every human planet, every major habitat, and began broadcasting the anthem, a low, persistent, subliminal hum that was slowly seeping into the human consciousness. Reports were already coming in of harmony cults forming on Earth and Mars. People who found the anthem beautiful, peaceful, a solution to humanity's chaotic nature. The Vexians weren't conquering humanity. They were converting them. "They followed us," Petrova whispered, the blood draining from her face. "Or they were on their way already." Eris, pale and exhausted from the jump, shook his head. "No, they didn't follow us. They were led here. The jump we made from Triton, the one that threw us into their space. It wasn't an accident." He brought up the choir's resonance log from their first, fateful jump. There was a harmonic beacon, faint, but deliberate. It was a lure, something here, in our own system, called to the choir, and it pulled the Vexians right behind it. The true, horrifying nature of their situation slammed into them. The silent choir they had found on Triton wasn't a random discovery. Humanity hadn't stumbled upon a secret key to the universe. They had been given one. They were a pawn in a cosmic game they hadn't even known they were playing. And now, the game had come home. From his listening post, thousands of light years away, Inquisitor Malachi watched the echo vanish. He saw the final word silence the dissidents' chaotic song, restoring a fragile, enforced order to the system. The anathema was not destroyed, merely quieted, contained once more. Malachi had recorded everything. The primitive ship's impossible weapon, their communion with the dissident, the song of passage, the sheer, terrifying power of chaos unleashed. The Vexian ascendancy's foundational truth had been proven to be a lie, and Malachi, the guardian of that truth, was now the sole keeper of the heresy. A new, dissonant thought entered his mind, a question no inquisitor should ever contemplate. What if the dissident was right? He turned his ship away from the pacified system. He did not send his report to the quorum. He did not share his recordings. He cloaked the quiet inquiry and vanished into the interstellar darkness. He was no longer an inquisitor of the Vexian ascendancy. He was now an inquisitor of reality itself, and his quiet inquiry had just begun. The homecoming was colder than the void. To the crew of the Echo, the familiar swirl of the Milky Way, the genelite of Sol, should have been a triumphant sight. Instead, it felt like arriving at their own funeral. 2 years had passed. 2 years during which the Vexian ascendancy had laid siege to the human soul. There were no orbital bombardments, no cities in ruin. The invasion was a quiet one, a creeping cultural and psychic infection broadcast on a carrier wave of perfect, logical harmony. The anthem of order played from the silent, watchful judicator fleets that hung like obsidian daggers over every human world. It was a subtle, persistent whisper in the background radiation, a song that promised peace, purpose, and an end to humanity's chaotic, self-destructive nature. And people were beginning to listen. Sol Command hailed them, their transmission a mix of disbelief, awe, and desperate hope. Captain Petrova's debriefing was short and brutal. She explained where they had been, what they had seen, and the power they had unwittingly unleashed. When she finished, a heavy silence filled the comm line, broken only by the faint, insidious hum of the Vexian anthem. "The Triton anomaly," the fleet admiral finally said, his voice weary. "The thing you called the silent choir. It's still there. The Vexians have it under quarantine, surrounded by a cordon of their heaviest ships. They seem afraid of it." It was Eris who connected the pieces. his mind still resonating with the cosmic echoes of the Song of Passage. "The beacon," he whispered, his eyes widening. "The lure that pulled us across the galaxy. It wasn't just a signal, it's the instrument itself. The choir on Triton is the source. It was planted there, waiting for a species chaotic enough, curious enough, to pick it up and play it." The truth was a chilling revelation. Humanity had been chosen, not as an ally, but as a catalyst. They were the unwitting agents of a cosmic schism, a tool to break a 3,000-year-old stalemate between absolute order and absolute chaos. "We weren't the players," Petrova said, her voice hard as steel. "We were the opening move." A desperate, impossible plan was forged. They would not fight the Vexian fleet. They would ignore it. They had to return to Triton, to the source, and finish the song they had started. The Echo, with its unique choir drive, was the only ship in human space that could even attempt it. A ghost capable of slipping through the cracks of the Vexian blockade. It was a suicide mission, a final, desperate gamble on the cosmic symphony. As they made their final preparations, a single, untraceable signal cut through all Sol command encryptions. It was a tight beam transmission aimed directly at the Echo. A hololith flickered to life on the bridge, revealing the stoic, crystalline features of Inquisitor Malachi. He was no longer in his obsidian robes, but stood on the stark bridge of the quiet inquiry, a lone figure against a backdrop of unknown stars. "Captain Petrova," he hummed, his voice a calm sea of gravel. "I have borne witness to a truth that has invalidated the core tenet of my civilization. My purpose is no longer to enforce the anthem, but to understand the symphony." He explained that he had followed them, not as a hunter, but as an observer. He told them that the Archangel, the final word, was now the flagship of the Sol Invasion Force, its silencing power, the final guarantee of humanity's conversion. "It is moving to Triton," Malachi concluded. "It has sensed your return. It intends to silence the source of the dissonance forever. The ascendancy is no longer a monolith. The release of the dissident, however brief, planted a seed of doubt. The truth of what I witnessed can turn that seed into a schism." He offered no aid, no alliance. He simply stated, "I will broadcast what I have recorded, the truth of your encounter, the existence of the dissident, the lie of our perfect order to the entire Vexian fleet. It will create a moment of chaos. What you do with that moment is up to you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. They were not alone in their fight. The journey to Triton was the quietest hell Petrova had ever experienced. Eris guided them, weaving the Echo through the patrol patterns of the Judicators, his face a mask of concentration. As they neared the outer cordon, the Vexian anthem grew to a deafening roar in the choir's senses. And then, as they slipped past the orbit of Uranus, Malachi kept his word. Every Vexian comm channel, every ship-to-ship network, every data stream in the Sol system was suddenly flooded with the Inquisitor's recordings. They saw the Echo's impossible trick with the Seventh Armada. They heard the psychic voice of the dissident, a figure of myth and heresy. They witnessed the power of the final word being used not against an external foe, but against one of their own. For the first time in millennia, the Vexian fleet was confronted with a contradiction, a dissonant chord in their perfect, logical world. Chaos erupted. Some ships simply shut down their comms, refusing the heresy. Others turned on their neighbors, accusing them of broadcasting falsehoods. The perfect, synchronized harmony of the Vexian blockade shattered into a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. This was the moment Malachi had promised. "Go! Petrova commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "Iris, take us in." The echo shot forward, a silver needle plunging toward the frozen blue sphere of Triton. Before them lay the Vexian cordon, now in disarray, and at his heart, the colossal, crystalline form of the final word Warsemoid, which had ignored the broadcast and was now powering its primary weapon. Its objective clear erased the Triton anomaly from existence. They broke through the last line of ships and dove into Triton's thin atmosphere. Below them, the forest of black crystalline spires, the silent choir, pulsed with a faint, expectant light. Eris had to connect the echo's choir directly to the source, to use the ship itself as an amplifier for whatever melody the Triton anomaly was meant to play. It was a connection that would almost certainly destroy the ship and kill them all. As the echo descended, the final word fired, a beam of pure, silver silence lanced down, not to destroy, but to unmake. Aris, his eyes glowing with an inner light, screamed as the Archangel's song slammed into his consciousness. But he held the connection. "It's not just about order or chaos," he cried out, his voice a strange harmony of his own and a dozen others. It was never a choice between the two. That was the test. In that final moment, as the echo systems began to fail and the silver silence crept across the bridge, Eris understood. The choir wasn't a weapon. The dissident wasn't a savior. The Vexians weren't merely tyrants. They were all parts of a greater whole. Humanity's role wasn't to pick a side. It was to compose the piece that brought them all together. He didn't fight the Archangel's song of order. He didn't embrace the dissident's song of chaos. He listened to both, and with the full power of the Triton choir surging through him, he wove them together. He played a new song, a human song. It was a melody that contained the rigid, predictable beauty of mathematics and the wild, improvisational freedom of jazz. It had the quiet, sorrowful notes of loneliness and the soaring, chaotic chords of hope. It was a symphony that acknowledged the necessity of structure but celebrated the beauty of the unpredictable. It was the song of a species that lived in perpetual, glorious contradiction. The symphony of becoming washed out from Triton carried on a wave of resonance that the final word's silencing field could not comprehend, because it did not oppose it. It included it. The silver beam faltered. The Vexian ships, already in turmoil, fell silent as the new music washed over them. It did not attack their minds. It opened them. It showed them a universe far larger, far more complex and beautiful than their simple anthem had ever allowed. The colossal Archangel. The final word, but simply stopped. Its song of absolute order was not defeated. It was harmonized, becoming the bass note in a far grander composition. After a long, silent moment, the great ship turned, its purpose broken, its truth undone, and slowly moved away, leading a fractured and forever changed Vexian fleet out of the system, not in retreat, but in search of a new understanding. On the bridge of the Echo, the oppressive silence was gone. The ship was crippled, bleeding atmosphere, but its crew was alive. Eris Thorn collapsed, the cosmic energy having passed through him, leaving him pale and fragile, but smiling. Petrova stood over him, looking out at the star, at the empty space where the invaders had been. The war was over. They hadn't won. They had answered. Humanity was safe. But the silence of the void had been permanently broken. The galaxy was awake now, alive with new questions. The Vexian Empire would tear itself apart and be reborn as something new. The dissident, and others like him, were now free to sing their songs. And humanity, the chaotic primitives who had been chosen as the catalyst, now stood at the center of it all. They were no longer just a noisy spark on a wet, unremarkable world. They were the conductors of a new cosmic age, the keepers of a truth that was neither order nor chaos, but the breathtaking, terrifying, and beautiful harmony of both. The age of enforced silence was over, and for the first time, humanity began to truly listen.